if you can use like Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, you can probably start a podcast. You basically just need a host, and then you put information into the host. So written like title of the episode, description of the episode, and then obviously the audio file, and then images if you want. And then what the host does is it sends it to all the directories, and 90% of people are listening through the directories, unless you have a really popular blog and you put the player on your blog.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi, and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nusky here. I'd just like to say thank you so very much for supporting this show. As is always the case, it's wonderful knowing that what I'm doing is making a difference for you. Now, today I have a very special guest on the line with me. I'm on the line with Mr. Tom Hunt. How are you, Tom?
Amazing. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm excellent, thank you. I have 2 feet and a heartbeat. I cannot complain. Now, I know you've taken some time out to spend with me in your busy day. But just to give a bit of context for everybody who's on the call with us, Tom is leading up a wonderful organisation amongst many others that he's been involved with called bCast. But we're not only going to be talking about bCast and as it helps marketers with their podcasting and all those things, but we're actually going to talk a little bit with Tom about his background, his journey towards where he got to be today with bCast. But before we do that, Tom, it's customary for me to learn a little bit more about yourself. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about yourself, where you're located and what you like to do in your pastime with the My Future Business audience.
Yeah, so currently located in the west of England. So I lived in London for 10 years, I think. But then for the last 6 months, I've been living actually in my fiance's mum's house in this lovely cottage in the countryside in Oxfordshire. Fantastic. And so we've been here for like 6 months. And I think we're going to move out into our own house maybe on Saturday. And so then me and my fiance, and we have a lovely little dog called Bear, we'll have our own house, which will be great.
Fantastic, love it. Now I know, things have been pretty crazy in the world lately. Is everything going well with you and yours in your environment over there?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. My fiance has a business. It's like a platform for booking events. So obviously that's not going too well at the moment because you legally can't have events with more than 6 people in the UK. But my business, we have bCast, as you mentioned, where we enable people to host a podcast, but we also have a service where we run podcasts for businesses. And we actually saw some quite nice growth because people had their offline marketing spend that they were going to put through my fiance's platform that they had to then switch to like brand building and online. And so it was pretty good for us.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing that there is a silver lining in such tumultuous times. Thank you very much for sharing that. I wonder, when you get some relaxation, some downtime, which I doubt very much that you have much of at the moment, Tom, what do you actually like doing with yourself?
I am quite introverted, so I like reading and I like walking in the countryside, I like running, and then probably socializing. So I don't have any like extreme or interesting hobbies. It's more just like reading or sleeping or walking.
Oh, well, that's a good thing. I know the My Future Business audience is made up of startup entrepreneurs, business owners, and the likes. And I'd love to share some nuggets of gold with them about your entrepreneurial journey. But if we can go back a few steps in terms of, I guess, your career, I know that you studied chemistry. What was that like?
Yeah, so it was cool. I mean, I was quite good at science at school, and my dad and my brother did it, so I chose chemistry. It was good. It was quite hard. It wasn't that sociable. So in the UK, you have like these big university towns where the university campus will be like outside the city, and it's amazing because all your friends are there. When you're in London, you don't really have that, and so you're just living in London with normal people. So, and if you add that on top of that, like my university, which is Imperial College, is just maths science, and so it was quite like hardcore. But it was a really good experience. Like, got really good at my analytical skills, got really good, and they pushed us quite hard. So it was definitely worth doing.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that you've obviously moved on leaps and bounds since then, and you've had other experiences in running businesses. You had even a marketplace that connected online entrepreneurs together with virtual assistants. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so from chemistry I went to the corporate world. When I was in the corporate world, I didn't really like it. I didn't really feel like I belonged. So I in 2014 I set myself the goal of replacing my salary with a business that I built on the internet. And
Hmm.
so I actually ended up building. I was working in outsourcing in the corporate world, so I built a team in the Philippines that would I basically sell those people to startups in London if I double their salary, and and then they would do work for them, like admin or marketing work. And so I built that, replaced the salary, left the corporate world at the end of that year, and then was basically traveling the world running that business.
Hmm.
I realized that that business wasn't going to scale very well because I was involved with every client. And so I decided to transition that into a marketplace. And so I started building Virtual Valley, which was basically Upwork, but for Filipino virtual assistants. And we launched that. It was an incredible experience. Started growing it. And then I think I dropped out too early and I sold it to a company in the US, not for very much.
Hmm.
Because I was like stressed, I was overworked. It was bootstrapped. I was trying to fund it myself and it was growing, but I thought these things grew like to like 10K a month in like 6 months, but actually it probably wouldn't take in like 18 months, and I was funding it. So I didn't have a technical co-founder, so I was paying developers to build it. So I think in hindsight, if I knew what I knew now and I was doing that, I would have
Hmm.
just stayed doing that for like 5 years, and now hopefully it would have been a big business. But I didn't. I dropped out, and then so that's what happened.
Well, one door closes and another one opens, I'm sure. I sit here and I think to myself, you've gone from a corporate existence to becoming an entrepreneur, business owner, startup business owner yourself. What did you need to do in terms of mindset? Did you have to shift the way you thought about things?
Yeah, I think I basically discovered like self-help, I think, like 2013. And so I started learning about I think I actually did a TEDx talk in on failure and in 2014, I think. And so that was the core like mindset shift is that you can still like, it doesn't really matter if you don't like you should prioritize the learning, not the positive or negative outcome. And if
Hmm.
you prioritize the learning, then ultimately over time you'll get more positive outcomes. And so that was a big shift. And I knew that I was like inexperienced and that I was probably gonna mess a lot of stuff up, which I have done. But then I also knew that I was like 25 at the time. I didn't have any kids or dogs or girlfriends,
Things
so I could
change.
yeah, yeah, things changed, but I had a very high risk profile, and so I could invest my time into things that may not work in the short term. But if you extend the time horizon to like 15 years, probably you're going to improve, and then probably you'll do something right.
Fantastic. I, I, I I think about that person who's just starting out and they've gone through all these pains that you must have gone through. What would be one of the biggest things that you would have learnt in the first 12 months going from, that corporate employee with a safe income to going it alone? What was the main thing that you took away from that time?
I think it was probably what did I learn the most? It was I probably learned the most about marketing.
Hmm.
I didn't really know anything about marketing, and so to sell the Filipino virtual assistants, it was just I was just doing cold email, and so I was able to sell it just based on like my personality and cold email. Then I started learning that actually, if you want to build a sustainable business, you want you ideally want to add value to people in the process of them becoming customers, which is really like content marketing, right?
Hmm.
And so from the next business, which was Virtual Valley, as we transitioned to the platform, I started trying to understand who the person is that we're trying to sell to, and then how can we add value to them on their journey so that if they come to need a virtual assistant, they'll come to us. And so I think that was like the core insight from the first year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that every day when you wake up, you learn something new. By the end of the day, you've accumulated some more knowledge. Now, I always think about your wonderful podcast platform for marketers called bCast, and I wonder, I guess, where the genesis for this came between that time that you sold this previous business to what it is today. How did it come about?
Yeah, so I think So after selling Virtual Valley and starting bCast, there was a lot of time and probably like 5 different businesses that I don't think we need to go into because none of them worked that well. But what actually happened was that I was I was employed last year and I was head of marketing at a B2B SaaS company. And the best
Mhm.
thing we did was start this podcast where we were interviewing our perfect customer. We got quite lucky, I think, because our perfect customer was like this new emerging job role. And there wasn't like a podcast or a blog in that area. And so we
Mhm.
grew quite quick. We closed deals with some of the guests. And so it was really profitable. And so me and a couple of people in the team that ran that podcast left, and now we do that for clients. But as we were, as I was doing that job, I built an audience in the SaaS marketing space just by studying how SaaS companies grew and publishing the case studies. Right?
Yeah.
And so this audience grew quite nicely, and then I was like, the strategy behind that was I want to learn more about SaaS marketing because ultimately I want to build a SaaS company. But at the same time, I want to, one of the best ways I think of starting a business now is not to build the product first, but it's to build the audience first and then decide what to sell to the audience.
Uh-huh.
So I build the audience and I was like, okay, so I'm doing this podcast really well at work. I have this audience of people that are quite valuable because everyone wants to like the MarTech and SaaS marketing is growing. And so what is a SaaS business that I can build that capitalizes on my experience, but also would be relevant for this audience? Um, so that's one thing. And then at the same time, as I was studying all these SaaS companies, I was learning about how bootstrap SaaS companies were growing. One big way of doing this is you find a market that's growing, and then you probably can't take on the whole market because there'll be big established players, but you
Mhm.
can take a small niche of that market, and then if you bootstrap, you can probably do well. So the theory was that podcasting is growing. I've seen the effects of this in my job. What is the sub niche within podcasting that we think we can serve better? And so I was obviously a SaaS marketer in my job. And so we were using a different podcast host to run our podcast. And there were all these things that I thought we could do to like streamline the process or make the podcast better that podcast host wasn't doing. So I was like, what if there was a podcast host just for marketers that would do these things? And so then I sent a PS on one of the emails to their email list saying, does anybody on this email list have experience building web apps and is interested in podcasts? This guy called Neil from Scotland replies. And then a month later, we signed an agreement and we're working together on bCast. And that was like September 12 months ago.
Yeah, I was
And
going to
so then we
say.
launched, yeah,
Yeah, it's only been since what, 2019?
yeah, exactly. So relatively fast. We launched something in May and then we launched on AppSumo in July. And then now we're just coming to the end of the AppSumo deal. We've got now a shitload of customers. We have some cash and we have a feature list that is like absolutely massive
Oh,
and loads of stuff to improve. And so that's the journey now is just transitioning, like basically using that cash to improve the product such that we can continue the growth.
I love how that you've almost done like a reverse product validation through, I guess, audience building. That's unusual. That's not how I normally see it. It's certainly not traditional. Is it the only way that you have learnt to add features or build a product in the past?
No, I previously it's definitely been like product first.
Yeah.
This is the first time that I've done audience first.
Hmm.
And I think it kind of lowers the risk because you building the audience just takes time. And then once you have the audience, there are like many different ways to monetize. And so you don't have to build a SaaS product, right? You could sell advertising or
Yeah.
you could do affiliate offers or you could sell a service. And so actually now we have like all of my time is really split between two things. So the SaaS Marketer blog is saasmarketer.io. That's just there. I'm not doing much on it anymore because I can't do more than two things. The other two things we have obviously is bCast, and then we have a service which is like much more, which is profitable and is also growing, where we just run the same podcast that we did for my old employer, but for like 9 different companies now, including my own employer. They're still paying us to do the podcast, right? And so
Fantastic.
that's another way. A number of the clients for that have come from the audience as well, right? So
Yep.
um, the audience is there, it's growing slowly, and ideally, it's almost like a content marketing play now for the service, which is called Fame and
Yep.
bCast, if
Yep.
that makes sense.
Absolutely. This is great content. I lurk in the background on social media, especially in podcast groups. I just watch and I read, and so many people, Tom, question how do I monetize, and they seem to struggle with this, whereas others, it's just another part of their day to monetize. What are some of the strategies that you could recommend for those who struggle with monetizing their show?
Yeah, I think the number one, like maybe we'll break down the different ways
Mm.
you can monetize. So I think
Yep.
there's four different categories. So one is selling your own stuff. Two is selling other people's stuff and getting a commission. Three is selling the attention, which is sponsorship, and then four is subscription.
Hmm.
So I think number one is by far and away the best way to do this. Apparently the subscription thing is working and it's getting big. I think it probably only works in a few niches like business and finance, or unless or you basically need a massive audience to make it work. Sponsorship, you have to spend all the time like finding the people to sponsor you, and then affiliate is just a bit like the the value really is like building the long-term relationship with the customers. And if you're doing affiliate, you're basically sending customers to other people.
Hmm.
So I think the thing, if someone's struggling to monetize, they need to really understand who the audience is and then what their problems are. And then you can build something that, whether it's a service or it's a digital product or it's a piece of software,
Hmm.
that will help solve that next problem. And so the so that's like the theory. The actual mechanics are, how do you go from somebody listening to an episode to you being able to contact them again, which really is how do you go from someone downloading to how do you get their email address, right? Because once you have the email address, it's the most valuable permission asset. You have to,
Ever
Facebook, it
get.
can't cut you off. You know what I mean? They can't
Yep.
shut down your group.
Yep.
So that like so that's the big challenge that I actually see, because once you have the email address, and you understand what the problem is, you can build a digital product that's going to solve that in whatever the niche is. And you can sell it for like, maybe you sell like an ebook for like $19, or maybe you sell like 1 hour of your time. And actually, I think the most profitable way for someone starting out to monetize it is through a service where you actually do the work that helps solve this person's problem. Um, to actually get the email address, I think you also have to think about what the problems are, because you need to offer the solution to that problem in the form of a free piece of information.
Hmm.
It's typically known as a lead magnet. We the way I think bCast is good for marketers is because there's two features. I don't want to turn this into a bCast pitch, but I'll quickly
No,
give an
absolutely. I want
overview.
to talk about that in some depth.
One is audio inserts. So you can without an editor, you can very easily insert audio to the start or end of an episode, without in a few clicks into any number of episodes for any period of time. So if you have a webinar next week and people need to opt in, you can add in a 30-second ad to every episode, to the whole backlog for the webinar next week, right? And so that's going to get people from the audio to a web page, ideally, or we'll talk about the second feature in a minute, where you get the email address. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're calling it auto opt-in. So instead of having to read out a URL in the ad, and so someone having to like open the phone, open the browser, type in the URL, click on the form, fill the form, we'll basically give you a blank email address that you can read out. And so it's basically two less steps. They just open the email app, send a blank email address to that email, and then that email address goes into bCast and then can go through into your email autoresponder. So we're trying to reduce the friction of getting the email address, because that's the most important thing for podcasters at the moment, I think. So those are the two features. We still need to build more integrations. So right now we only allow Zapier webhook integration to take that email into like MailChimp or whatever. So we need to build more integrations there. But that's why. And so now that we're actually tying up different questions that you've asked, Rick, because those two features enable us to take a sub niche of the podcast market, right? Because no other host has them, and they're more suited directly to the type of person that we are trying to help with the product.
With this problem. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a user of bCast myself, and I've used dozens of them. There are a multitude of different options out there. Um, are you learning anything from others that you might see inside of bCast in the future?
Sorry, just repeat that. Cut out slightly.
Are you learning anything from other podcast hosts that you might see being added to
Yeah.
bCast in the future?
Yeah, we have a massive list, and there are some really good other hosts. There are definitely features that we would take from them to bring over, just like off the top of my head. We need to build out more analytics, and I think actually I don't want to say the word, but Anchor's analytics are probably the best. But that I think is because they are owned by Spotify, so they get more data from Spotify than anyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to do more work on analytics. There is something super cool that one other podcast host does, and with bCast you can transcribe the audio and then put it on your blog for the SEO value. But what this host does is they automatically transcribe everything, and so when on their like podcast host website, you can just literally, or even in their player, I think you can search for a word, and then that will like take you to the place in the podcast where that word has been said. I think that's quite cool, and so that's something that we might also look at.
Yeah, this is just wonderful because I'm, like I said, I'm a user. I use this platform in different ways. I've been able to successfully add pre-roll and post-roll adverts. That's simply a message at the start and at the end for everybody who's listening to each episode. And I've been able to monetize those things, but I've also been able to use a dedicated player on the homepage of our website, Tom, which is for sponsors to leave their own audio ad, and that's the only thing that's played on there. What are some of the things that the bCast
Nice.
community are doing that that captures the imagination like that?
Yeah, I think one really cool one I saw, it's not that specific to bCast, but you know, on the sidebar on your blog, you
Mm-hmm.
have sometimes like a floating sidebar. Someone put a player in that, and it's kind of talking about, it's like an extra commentary on the blog post that's been written. So I thought that was really cool. In terms of inventiveness, yeah, I've seen somebody with the audio inserts have like, they have 100 episodes, and there's a different insert for a different episode at the start and end for each different episode. So they're really like taking that to the extreme. So like one episode that's talking about a specific topic, the insert they put at the start or the end is like related to that topic and sends people to an ebook related to that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so we like, I'm not doing that on our podcast, but that's like super inventive. So yeah, it's really useful for us to see how people are using it, because then that gives us more insight or ideas for making the product better and different.
Thank you. I'm loving the call. Thank you so very much for sharing. I wonder, as a business leader, how many people work or on the peripheral or even at the core of the bCast operations at the moment?
It's pretty lean. So there's myself, and I do, I guess, everything that needs to be done. So there's like strategy and all the like marketing, any like calls with customers. There is Neil, who is just responsible for building. Actually, yeah. So I'm like on the product side, so understanding what these people want and then working with Neil to build it. Neil's basically built everything. And then there's also Audrey, who is running customer support. And so, well, I mean, me and him basically run support, but he's there every day. I'm there most days. And so just three of us. We are right now interviewing our first developer,
Mm-hmm.
who is basically going to support Neil building all the stuff that we need to build.
This is a platform where people can obviously start podcasting, but oftentimes I speak with people, especially now with everything going on in the world as it is, that they want to start their own podcast, but they have absolutely no idea how to get started. They're often trumped by this whole fear of technology being greater than their own ability to start it up. How easy is it for somebody to start a podcast?
Yeah, I think podcasting is still relatively hard for people to understand, but I think if you can use like Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, you can probably start a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You basically just need a host, and then you put information into the host. So written like title of the episode, description of the episode, and then obviously the audio file, and then images if you want. And so you just put that in the host, and then what the host does is it sends it to all the directories, and 90% of people are listening through the directories, unless you have a really popular blog and you put the player on your blog. And so that's basically all you need to do is like put information into the host. The host sends it to the directories. Now, most hosts or bcasts will automatically send to a number of directories. Some you might have to do yourself. But that's basically it. It's like putting information into the host, and then the host will send it out for you. Technically, that's what needs to be done.
It's pretty simple on the surface. It's one of those things where you learn it once, Tom, and then it becomes like riding a bike, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking at all of the resources that you have available, and I think we're getting to that point in the call, Tom, where maybe if we could share how people are going to find you and all of the resources that you would point them to learn more about yourself as well as bCast.
Yeah, I think there are three domains. First, if you want to see how we've like built an audience, uh, the domain is saasmarketer.io. And so that's just creating content so we can build the audience and then work out how else we can help the audience. The bcast is obviously bcast.fm. And then if you are a business and you want to get into podcasting, then we have a service that does that for you. That's called fame.so is the website for that.
Fantastic, Tom. Thank you so very much. Now, for everybody who is listening, if you're keen to become a podcaster, use it to build a better business, grow your audience, build your reputation, whatever your reasons are to do that. I know full well as a user of bCast that this is an up-and-coming winner in the podcast space. Tom, I just have to stop and say thank you so very much for spending some time with me on the My Future Business show today.
Rick, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.